So we're up to Parshas Bo. Parshas Bo is a very important parsha. Not that any are unimportant, but it's important in the sense that it's the, if you will, the Torah is starting to get down to business.
It's dramatic.
The first mitzvahs, the official mitzvahs, although there are mitzvahs in Sefer Bereshis, but there are officially the first mitzvahs, HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem, right? And the famous Rashi, everybody knows, in the first Rashi in the Torah could have started from HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem, and why does it say the Bereshis? Not going to go into that. But the point is that it's, the Torah gives us a whole slew of mitzvahs there for Yetzias Mitzrayim, for the Seder, etc. And then we get still a couple of the Parshas of narrative till the Torah really gets down to business, I think, in Parshas Mishpatim. But so there's lots of things to talk about in Parshas Bo. It's really a problem to choose what to talk about. This is something I always wanted to go into a little bit more. There's a very famous Ramban, Nachmanides, at the very end of Parshas Bo that's often quoted. You probably may have heard of it. I've never really spent much time learning it inside. The first time I heard about it, I remember, was from Rabbi Yitzchak Kerzner, if that name means anything to you. Is that Sal? Many years ago. He was a very special Yid, and I remember him talking about it, it's often quoted, this Ramban, and it's interesting, and according to what the Ramban says here, basically he says it's some of the most fundamental things that we have in our belief system. So it is worth once to read it through inside, but also to comment, because what the Ramban is saying is not necessarily agreed upon by everybody, and maybe how we can see those things back and forth. So the Ramban here is going off the mitzvah of one of the things at the very end of Parshas Bo. The last two sections of Parshas Bo are, the Parsha is called Kadesh and Vahya Kiviyacha. Anybody know why those two Parshas might be usually important? They're in your tefillin, right? If you ask most people, what does it say in the tefillin? Right? What's inside them? So most people say the Shema. The Shema is there, V'hayim Shema is there, right? Why are they there? Because in both of those two parshios it says the pasuk, right? V'hayu la'os al yadecha v'letotafos beineinecha. They should be, the mitzvah of tefillin is in the first parsha, second parsha of Shema, and the second parsha of Shema. So therefore, it should be doing that, and we actually do it. We put it there. Okay, but there's 4 parshios of tefillin, and according to the way the Ramban is saying it over here, and I'm not going to go into that part of it so much, but he's almost saying that's the more important parshios in the tefillin, not more so than Shema and V'hayim Shemoah. And he's saying that as part of his commentary on Parshas Bo in general, and let's just talk about that for a minute. What was the main significance of Parshas Bo? Parshas Bo, we find the last 3 makos, right? The first 7 are in Va'era, and then 3 in Parshas Bo. How do you know that, by the way? Famous little code, right? The first 2 letters of Va'era are Vav Aleph, 6 and 1 and 7. The first 2 letters of Bo are Beis Aleph, 3. Okay, so the last 3 makos are in Parshas Bo, but it's ending up the 10 makos. And what's the purpose of the 10 makos? After all, if Hashem really wanted to get us out of Egypt, he could have basically had all the Egyptians drop dead, right? Or, short of that, do Makas Bechoros is Makkah number 1, done. Why do we have to go through this whole thing that took probably close to a year? Different opinions about what it is, but at least 10 months, according to most opinions. There was, a Makkah. I think Rashi says that somewhere in Parshas Vayera there was a Makkah, and then there were 3 weeks for them to, so to speak, think it over, recuperate a little bit, and then the next one. So each one was about over a month period. So why was that there? Hashem wanted to do much more than just get the Jews out. That he could have done easily. It was much more of a show and tell, right? Showing off, basically, as the Ramban will talk about, as we'll read, right? He wanted to show something. basically that there was something very important that Hashem wanted to do, but not only to do it for that time, but for all time. And for all time, we're supposed to remember. Now, what do we do in order to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim? Several things. Seder, or Pesach in general, right? So, and specifically the Seder, we talk about it at great length. But in the middle of the Seder, we say, there's one little part in the Seder, we have this machlokes of the Chachamim and Ben Zoma, right? About whether we say Mitzrayim every night, or we say it Libos HaMashiach. But so in that is the pasuk, Leman Tiskor Yom Tzeischa Me'eretz Mitzrayim Kol Yimei Chayecha. You should remember that we went out of Mitzrayim all the days of your life. Question is by night also, not by night, whatever. But every day we have a mitzvah to remember Mitzrayim. And there's more things than that. There's every Kiddush, Zecher Yetzias Mitzrayim. Shabbos, Zecher Yetzias Mitzrayim. Yontif, Zecher Yetzias Mitzrayim. Every Zecher Yetzias Mitzrayim, again and again and again, remembering Mitzrayim. And, very importantly, tefillin, right? And what is the purpose of tefillin? And he says this in the part we're not going to read, basically, that we should take that idea of Mitzrayim and plant it in our heads every day. That's why we tie it in our head and tie it down. And it shouldn't leave, that we should think about Mitzrayim every day. That should be one of the main reasons we put on tefillin. I don't know how many times I certainly am guilty of not having thought about that, perhaps ever, before reading this. If I think about anything when I'm putting on my tefillin, it's usually more about the Shema and Rahim Shema. But he says that's really the main thing. And he says, well, and once we're talking about Mitzrayim, so okay, put in Shema and Rahim Shema, which talks about all the mitzvahs and all. They're also, because we went out of Mitzrayim, we got the mitzvahs and we got this and Shema. But Kaddish and those two parshas really talk about Mitzrayim. Those are the most important ones. Okay, so that's what the Ramban said basically. He said other things too, up until the part where we're going to start, and we're going to start on the page. You got 2 pages of front and back page over there, so I'm going to be on the one that doesn't have Bishalach on it. Starting on the top, it's Shin Mem Hey, page Shin Mem Hey. You see that at the top? Yes. Okay, so if we go for about 4 lines from the bottom, okay, towards the end of the line. Little 3 over there, footnote. Okay, Hine. We'll start over there. Right? Maybe maybe to actually just saying what I said a moment ago. Start a line or 2 before that. Ulatotafos levaer she'ein hamitzvah bein ha'inayim lamata v'gova harosh manichim. We put this mitzvah on the top of our heads, so we should remember Mitzrayim. Right? Okay. Now he says. V'ata omar lecha klal b'tam mitzvos rabos. So now I'm going to tell you a general rule that applies to many mitzvos. Hine, me'es hayos avodah zarah ba'olam b'imei enosh. When was the first time that we saw avodah zarah entering the world? Chazal tell us was the days of Enosh. And what was that? Like the 3rd generation? I think that was. I think he was Shes's son, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was the 3rd generation of humans. Okay? Hechelu hadeos lehishtabesh be'emunah. So things got corrupted as far as Emunah is concerned. How so? Mehem kofrim be'ikar. There were some who denied God altogether. V'omrim, right? Ki ha'olam kadmon. And they said, the world it always was, not created the way it is. It always was. No, nothing new here. Kachashu b'Hashem v'amru lohu, or they denied he's not there. Umehem, there are others who said, maybe like Aristotle more and other people, machishim b'yidiyaso haprotis. They denied, okay, God did create the world. They couldn't have the world without a creator. They're willing to grant that, but did Hashem? Does he really know what's going on in the world? He's so great, he's up there, he's involved with so many celestial things, and he has, millions of suns and planets and constellations, He knows what I did yesterday for breakfast. He's not interested, right? He doesn't have daya with that. Okay? He has a no. That's the second group. They say maybe he even knows. But they say that he's not being mashgiach. In other words, he's not supervising, he's not really watching what's going on. V'yasu adams, let's turn the page, kidgei hayab. And people are like the fish of the sea. In other words, we're below the surface, right? We know they're there, and they're swimming around. But if you look at the sea, you don't see anything, right? And they certainly don't see the sea. It's a whole world out there we don't know anything about. Hashem doesn't pay attention to them. No such thing as reward or punishment. And they'll say, Azav Hashem es haaretz. Hashem left the world. He created it. Now he's on to doing other stuff. Right? Why would he be busy with us little nothings? Right? What?
Serial
Yeah.
entrepreneur.
On to the next thing. And actually, there's no proof that he isn't. By the way, we like to think we're the only game in town, but there may be within the solar system another planet, not solar system probably, but within certainly the known universe in some galaxy. How's that going, Star Trek? And some there may very well be another planet somewhere with the people. We don't know. It's irrelevant really to us. But anyway, so that's what they think. If Hashem actually gets interested in some group or even an individual, then then maybe he'll do something to change the way the world usually works. V'tivo, and the nature that it is. So yispara l'chol bitul hadeos kahela kulam. But when we see that Hashem does special miracles, so to speak, all the other things go away. Why? Ki hamofes hanifla more, when we have an unusual miracle that happens, it teaches sheyesh la'olam elokah, that it's not just something that was set, so to speak, in steady state and this goes on forever. But the world has a God. Machadshoy v'yodeya u'mashgiach v'yochol. He renews it. Right? We say that in our davening every morning. Hamachadesh betuvo b'chol yom tamid maseh bereshis. That at every moment Hashem is actually recreating the world. And that's a very mind-boggling concept if you think about it. That every moment Hashem is recreating the world. What do you mean? You didn't know what I did 5 minutes ago. What's going on? Much to talk about. We don't have time to go into that at length. I'll just say that it's. I'll say one thing because I think that's an important idea. Always, at least, that concept that Hashem is constantly redoing the world, or that I think is easier for us to understand today than it was years ago, because we know, right, that there's nothing that's really constant. Is that solid? This table? One would think. I know you don't want me to bang it much harder, right? One would think so. The truth is, though, what would a physicist tell you?
Just a bunch of atoms.
What? Just a bunch of electrons floating around, right? And most of it's 99.9999% empty space, actually. Right? And it's all electrons running around, infinite electrons at dizzying speeds, and it gives the appearance as if there's a solid thing here, but it's really not so. So if we understand that, and what's keeping it going, no clue, right? Ratzon Hashem, really. Even the scientists can tell you what forces there are, but why they're there and how they're there and how they run, nobody knows. Why there's gravity, etc. That's the way it is, right? And
the body is constantly regenerating itself.
The body,
cellular,
yeah.
The organs in the body is constantly disposing of the dying tissue and constantly.
Well, that's for sure. I'm saying even an inanimate action, even would seem as solid as stone. It's also not really solid, right? And so Hashem is constantly, that's how I understand anyway. He's at every moment making those forces run, because at any moment he could just go poof, and everything would literally go poof, because there's nothing that's real. Everything is just electrons running around. Okay. Anyway, so he's doing that. So when there's a miracle, that shows something, he says, right? And when a Navi tells us beforehand that it's going to happen, so Yispar Mimenu Od Amita Sanavua, then we know something that the Navi is saying something which is, we know that this Navi knows what he's talking about because he was able to predict it. Because Hashem is there, and he tells his secrets to his servants, the Nevi'im. And based on that, we can understand the whole Torah. So stop right there. We're going to go later. I hope we'll have time to go through it a little bit more. That statement, he says that from the miracles we understand and we can prove the truth of the Torah. The Rambam would say, Chas v'shalom. Right? The Rambam doesn't like that idea at all. The Rambam would say, basically, we don't prove with the fact that wonders happen and miracles happen. That doesn't prove it, because if that was the case, David Copperfield could be God, right? He does these things that are just we don't have no clue how he does them, right? But we know somewhere back there that there must be some sleight of hand or something, but we have no idea how some of those. It's amazing. There's this other guy, I can't think of his name right now. I've watched him a few times. I don't know how it's even possible to do such, but they can do it somehow, right? But say so the Rambam would say this is not a raya, right? Why? So why do we believe? Because each of us, and certainly all the people then, were at Sinai, and we personally witnessed Hashem giving the Torah, and we personally witnessed Hashem talking to Moshe, and therefore we know it from our own experience, and not because somebody came and did a miracle. Okay. Anyway, we'll get to that. And I think that's one of the main things I want to talk about tonight, really, which is, again, this is a topic that's really a big topic with a lot of things, but I want to point out that there are different opinions about it. But certainly the Ramban here, this is a very famous one, an important one. He's saying, that's how we know. If we have a great miracle, we know things. And then he says, and that's what we meant. I was referring to this before. He says, "V'lechein yomer hakosov," and that's why the pasuk says, "B'mofsim," in these miracles in Mitzrayim. A few says it says, "Why am I doing this miracle? Laman teda ki ani Hashem bekerev haaretz." So you should know that I am Hashem in the land, right? Right. That's why I'm doing it. Lahoros, to teach ala hashgacha, that Hashem is watching the land. He didn't leave it in God. Or he says, Laman teda ki ani li Hashem haaretz. Now you should know that Hashem owns the world. So he says that the world was created, not like those who say the world always was, right? And he says, Bavur teda ki ein kamoni b'chol haaretz. So you should know there's no one like me in the land. Lahoros al yicholah shu shalat b'kol, to tell on his capabilities that he rules over everything, right? So and etc. Because all these things, the Mitzrim were makrishim or mistapkin. About all these things, either the Egyptians either denied them, or they didn't know about them, or they said the Rambam not true. Imkein ha'osos v'hamofsim ha'gedolim, those great signs that they saw were edim ne'emanim be'emunah sabore. They were great witnesses, as it were, in our belief of Hashem, uva Torah kula, and the entire Torah. Okay, so that's what was there. So now the Ramban is about to address something else, which is, there are lots of people out there who said, I don't know if this is all true or not. And, you say these miracles happened 3,500 years ago. Okay, but who knows what happened, and we have a telephone game and all these other things we hear about. If Hashem would come today and do a miracle today, if I could, tell me which stock to buy and tomorrow would go up, or, whatever, then I'd believe, right? But Ramban is addressing that now, and he says that, right, HaKadosh Baruch Hu lo yasa osu mofes b'chol dor la'enei kol rasha. That Hashem is not going to work that hard, so to speak, and put it os and the mofes. Not that it's hard for him, for every person or kofar, everybody denies. Yitzaba osanu, so he can't do that. Why cannot Hashem do miracles at all times?
Just take away free will.
Exactly, we'll take away free will if I'm doing it based on because Hashem is almost taking like with Paro, he almost had no choice but to do it what he did. In fact, the famous Ramban actually says that that whole business of Hashem hardening Pharaoh's heart. Pshat is that any normal human being, by the time the fourth or fifth baka would have worn out, of course he would have folded, right? Hashem had to, so to speak, strengthen him so that he still retained free will. It wasn't that he was forcing him to. If he didn't have extra free will, so to speak, vitamins, he wouldn't have been able. He would have just folded. Hashem wanted it to prove all these things, to do all these things, right? He was using power as a tool. So therefore, but because Hashem can't do that, right? There's another very just mentioned. If you ever see I think it was Varya Kaplan wrote a book called "If You Were God," a little book, right? If you haven't read it, you should read it. It's maybe 25 pages. The whole thing's, and he makes this point there very, very well, right? that, if you were, how would you run the world, and why Hashem runs the world the way he runs it. And one of those points is that, he can't directly influence things in the world all the time, or else his whole plan of having us take meaningful choices, etc., wouldn't be able to happen, right? So he says, so you can't do it all the time, but what? Nevertheless, one time he did. I think Rabbi Kaplan talks about that. One time, he showed his hand, so to speak. Where? In those days, in Mitzrayim, right? And therefore, it's important for us to remember that, because that was the one and only time he did it. So therefore, Yitzhak sanu shenazeh tamid zikaron va'os lashero einenu. We have to always remember and make a sign of what we had seen. V'na'atik hadavar el banenu u'bneihem livneihem, and we have to pass this message down to our children, to our grandchildren, u'bneihem l'dor acharon, to the final generation. That's why Hashem put such an emphasis on Mitzrayim, because that's when he showed all these things once and for all, literally. That's what he did. V'hichmir ma'od b'inyan hazeh, and Hashem was very stringent about these things. We find by Pesach the laws are very chamor. Shechiv kares b'achilus chametz. If you eat chametz, kares, right? Very serious. Azivas haPesach, or if you do not bring a korban Pesach, it's one of the only two commandments where you get kares for not doing something. V'hitzrich shenichtov kol ma shenira elenu ba'osos u'v'mosim al yadenu, and we should write about it. Where should we write about it? On our arms and on our heads, right? Tefillin. Again, why is tefillin there? So we should remember every time we put on tefillin, Tziyus Mitzrayim. And not only that, it said that we should have Pischei Bateim, B'nei Mezuzah, and we should say it every day and every morning, as they said, Emes v'yatziv doraisa. Interesting, that the Emes v'yatziv is doraisa, according to, I don't know, he's quoting here 17. What's 17? Gemara Brachas. Okay, that Emes v'yatziv doraisa. Because it says that to say emes v'yatziv, to that affirmation that we're making that everything is true about Yetzias Mitzrayim, that's important. Interesting why he throws that in. And there are many mitzvahs which are zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim. Why? Hakol, all of this, that there should be in all the generations testimony through signs that we should not forget it. That's why we put such an emphasis on Yetzias Mitzrayim. And an apostate has no way of denying it, because he knows, right, that the Jewish people, how do we know? Because I know it, because my father told it to him, and his grandfather told it to him, and his grandfather told it to him, and even if sometimes there's a generation or two that mix out, but we all know that all these things have been passed down for thousands of years, as some of the most important information from generation to another. Ki hakone mezuzah bezuz echad. I don't know which store he goes to. That if you buy a mezuzah for one zuz, v'yikva bepescho, and put it on his doorway, v'niskavein be'inyana, and thinks about what it means, just by that very act, hode b'chidush ha'olam. He's saying that I affirm that Hashem created the world, and Hashem knows what's going on, and Hashem is watching me, and all of the nevuas, and everything in the Torah. Milvad shahodeh. Besides that, he's saying that chesed habori hagadol ma'od alosei ritzono. And he's thinking about the great chesed Hashem did for us. Shehotziyanu miyav oso avdus, that he took us out of that slavery, lecherus, to freedom, v'chavod gadol l'schus avoseim hafechafetzim b'yirshemo. And it's a tremendous kavod for the merit of avos that the children are continuing this. And therefore they said, all the mitzvahs are very precious to us, and that's why we should be careful about them. Because beyond the particular mitzvah we're doing, we're doing Hashem's will, and we're saying implicitly that we're thanking Hashem, we're saying that we owe Hashem, mekavanas kol ha-mitzvos, and the purpose of all the mitzvos, what's the purpose is? Shanamin belokeinu, so we should believe in Hashem, know the Elav, and we should thank Him, shehu boreinu, that He is our Creator. V'hi kavanas hayitzira. That, you ask people, why did God create the world? Hashem created the world because He wanted to be acknowledged, right? He wanted ultimately that we should acknowledge Him, right? She'ein lanu tam acher b'yitzira rishon. And why else would Hashem create the world? Ve'ein el elyon chafetz b'tachat nonim. And this is such a beautiful thing he says over here. Hashem has no desire for those down below, milvad, except sheyeda ha'adam v'yodel elokav, that the person should know and say to his God, shibaro, and thank Him for creating him. V'kavanas haromamus hakol b'tfilos, and on all the kavana of all of that we say in our davening and in the batei knesios and tfilos harabim. What is the kavanah of all of them? Sheyil livnei adam makom yiskabtzu, that people should come together. V'yodu l'kel shabaram, and thank Hashem who created them. V'hemtziam, and who caused them to be. V'yifarsamu zeh, and they say so publicly. V'yomru l'fovnech lodav, and they say before Him, Briyosecha adachnu, we are your creatures. I remember Rabbi Kurzner talking about this. The mashal he gave was that imagine when you go up on a plane, and you look, and when you get to a certain height, you look down, and already you can't see the cars, and you see these little lights, and maybe you see, and imagine Hashem is looking down, the God's view at Earth, and there's little pockets of light here and there of people coming up and saying, Briyosecha anu, Briyosecha anu. I always think of that when I'm in the plane looking down, right? That we're your creatures. That's Hashem's view, so to speak. We think of Him being in shul with us imminently, and that's true too. But He's also, of course, up there and looking down at us, and that gives Him a lot of pleasure. That we can, so to speak, send up those little rays from down below, those little lights coming up. Right? Yeah. So, and then he continues, not done yet. Actually, we haven't even quoted the most famous part yet. V'zu kavanasan b'ma she'amru, and that's the kavanah and what they say. Vayikru el Elohim b'chozka. They called out to Hashem loudly. I don't know when that was. 31 is what? In Yonah, right? Yonah. I guess when the sailors, in the ship, they called out to Hashem, right? So, Mikana talamed shetzfila tzricha kol. From here you learn that davening needs voice, right? Chatzifa natzach levisha. Interesting. Chutzpah conquers busha. That if we're willing to go and yell a little bit, that conquers busha. I don't know how much this particular line of the Ramban is studied in Karlin, but they certainly would. If you've ever davened with them, they believe in screaming during davening. Not my cup of tea, but okay. But that's what they. But you could. There is this aspect to it to get emotionally involved in it. Uminhan, and then he says another thing that's very important. Umin hanisim hagedolim. Going to the next page. Hamafursamim, right? The from the great and well-known miracles are there. Adam modeh benisim hanistorit. If you know that Hashem is capable of doing these great things, that is how we can gain confidence, knowledge, belief about the more hidden miracles. Shehu Yisod HaTorah Kula, which are then that's the basic basis of the entire Torah. What do we call hidden miracles? Basically, usually is one word that we use for them. What? Nature. Right. Right. Nature. Right. There's so many ways that one can talk about this, and there's one way always come up that there's a famous story about Rav Chanina ben Dosa. I'm sure you all know the story. He was very poor, and they wanted to light his wife wanted to light Shabbos candles, and there wasn't any oil, right? So he said, "What do we have?" So she said, "Well, we have some vinegar." Okay, put that in. Whoever, the one who commanded that the oil should burn, the vinegar would burn, and it did. Okay, now what's that story about? Rav Chanina ben Dosa was a miracle man. Right? A lot of miracles happened to him, but shot on that at the deeper level is, what is the difference between miracle and nature? And Rav Dessler and many others have lots and lots to say about this. But nature, if you will, is miracles that happen on a consistent basis and happen regularly. Right? So you mentioned the way the body renews itself. Everything about the body, the way that we breathe, the way that we eat, the way that everything. It's miraculous. It's unbelievable that things happen. Though that there is gravity, right? Yeah. You take things for granted. But everything about everything is really a miracle. And what is a nace? Actually, and the word nace, Rav Hirsch and others I've seen point out that the word nace, Rosh Weiss, I remember here talking about this. We find in the Torah that several places. One place is that when we had that story with the copper snake, when they were dying, so Moshe was supposed to take this out, and it says simoto al nace, place it up as a nace. What do you mean? As a sort of like a flag, like a symbol, like a sign. That's what it is. A nace is a flag. It's a symbol. What's it a symbol of? It's a symbol that Hashem's running the world. And that exactly what the Ramban is saying here, that when we see the miracle, right, it's supposed to tell us, you know what, that's just a miracle that happens not regularly. But there are lots of miracles that happen very regularly. Now, why is it important that should be nature? Again, not our topic, but it's very important that it should be nature. Important that things happen consistently. It's important that there should be gravity, that things are predictable. Why is that important?
Because you can't function otherwise.
It's hard to function. Okay. Why not?
Because there are no givens.
No givens. You don't know if I take this, if it's going to go down, going to go up, it's going to drop. There's no cause and effect. There's no, and importantly from a religious perspective, besides a practical perspective, there's no free will anymore, because free will only makes sense in the context of, if I know if I do this, then that's going to happen. If I do this, it's going to happen. But if it's all random, it's chaos, and no clue what's going to happen if I do this or that, right? Then, there's no such thing as taking a choice, because, I don't know, nothing matters anyway.
Nothing's likely.
What?
Nothing's likely.
Yeah. So therefore, it's important to have a framework, and the Rambam, if we get to it, we'll see he sets that that's very important, and that he talks about that at length, that there should be fixed rules, and Hashem. I'll just let the cat out of the bag. What the Rambam basically says, and there's a basic machlokes here between the Rambam and the Ramban, but if you have, so many examples, but let's say, I think I mentioned this the other day at the time, if somebody goes and they say, I went, and I missed the bus, right? Oh, I guess Hashem didn't want me to make the bus, right? Some people would say, it's hashgacha, I shouldn't, the bus should come early, it's a bus, I should have been busy, I should have gone. That's one people. Some people might say that. The Rambam wouldn't agree with that. Rambam would say, you know why you missed the bus? Because you're late. And the bus comes when it comes, right? And you don't go blaming Hashem. Oh, Hashem didn't want me. Anytime there are people like that, we all know people like that. Anything that happens, I guess Hashem didn't want this to happen. Hashem didn't want that to happen. Of course, it's true to some extent, but the Rambam would say on many things where you didn't act responsibly enough, don't blame Hashem, right? You didn't do it, and he put us into teva, and then. Not everything is hashgacha, and then it goes into a question like, so many questions are involved here. I'm just talking about them, but there are lots of things. When there's a famous statement from one of the Chassidish Rebbes, I forget which one, who said that not one leaf falls off a tree without a malach, telling it to go down and moving it. Right? Would the Rambam like that? I don't think so. Right? With this, what every mosquito that buzzes around, is that because Hashem told that mosquito to come and bother me right now, or that's just what mosquitoes do? Because that's the teva. Now, could Hashem decide that a particular mosquito should go and bother? Yes, of course. There's stories like that, for instance, famously with Titus, right? What? So what is hashgacha pratis? Okay, so according to starting with the Rambam, the hashgacha pratis is not on, what every animal does and what every insect does, and even, frankly, every Mongolian and every Chinese and every French, English, Greek, whatever, all these people who have little or nothing to do with the Ratzon of Hashem, they just are there, and they serve the greater purpose of the world. Except when Hashem wants some particular thing to happen, then he'll get more involved with that nation. Otherwise, people, just like the animals in the field and etc. So many humans just live their lives and do what they do, and he doesn't get involved. The degree of hashgacha pratis, the way the Rambam basically presents it, is that for the closer that a person is to Hashem's purpose for creating the world, the more Hashem, so to speak, pays attention to them. The more that person has the privilege of being, having hashgacha on him. And of course, some people, the Moshe Rabbeinu is for sure, but I mean, even, a person who's a tzaddik, a tzaddikah, or a special person, or a person who is, in a position of prominence or a place there that they can affect many other people, etc. To that extent, those people are more, so to speak, under Hashem's direct hashgacha, supervision, looking at, etc. And sometimes he will, how does he Hashem control events? In that book again, if you were God, he talks about that, how Hashem, from externally can cause all sorts of things to happen, to influence, world events. You may have seen this thing that's been going around the internet the last couple of weeks from this guy. He was listing all the miracles that were happening. Pilachowski, right. So if you've seen that, you know what I'm talking about. It's unbelievable. If you haven't seen it, I'll send it to you. It's unbelievable. It's been a very tough the last 2 years in many ways. But at the same time, there have been unbelievable miracles that happened. And the ones maybe who would say that the most, oddly enough, but inspiringly enough, are the hostages who've been released to talk about the miracles. We talked about that. I remember, how they saw miracles every day. What happened with them? It's just amazing. So the more that a person, so to speak, is, involved in Hashem's purpose in the world, there'll be more hashgacha, according to the Rambam. And those who have little or nothing to do with the Hashem's purpose in the world, so they just, they'll go. Things will happen the way things happen. What? True, right. You're saying that if you, right, it says if you go with me with Kerry, that's not even if we elect a certain Democrat. but if we go if we go with Hashem in a way that all things just happens, Hashem says, okay, things just happen. Go ahead. Let's see how it just happens, right? But if not, things will go the way. So basically, the Rambam is in that mode, but the Ramban is very much not in that road. Right, and let's see more of what he says over here. He says that the positive miracles show about the missing miracles that are Yisoid Kol HaTorah, and this is the famous line that's always quoted: She'ein la'adam chelek b'Toras Moshe Rabbeinu. A person does not have any portion in the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu ad shenamin, until we believe b'chol dvareinu, with everything that happens. Umikreinu, and everything again that occurs to us. Shekulam nisim, everything's a miracle. Ein behem teva, no such thing as nature. Minhago shel olam, or things just go by the way of the world. Take that, Rambam. Bein berabim, bein beyachid, whether it's things that happen to the public, but to an individual, right? Im yaseh hamitzvahs yaslichenu scharo. If you do the mitzvahs, things will go well for you, and your schar will be good. Yavar alehem, and if you don't do the mitzvahs, yachrisenu ansho, the punishment will catch up to you. Now, of course, we have the issues of tzaddik viralo and all that. So he's talking about the long term, not the short term, including not only this world but the next world, right? But anyway, that's what it is. Hakol b'gzeras elyon. Everything is according to the decree of the divine decree. Kasher iskarti kvar, like I already spoke about this earlier. V'yisparsamu hanisim hanistorim binyan harabim, and eventually hidden miracles sometimes are get known amongst the rabbim. Like Barry mentioned, like it's when we see with the tochacha, etc., that these things happen. As the pasuk says, Kol hagoyim al ma asa Hashem kacha la'aretz hazos. In Parshas Nitzavim, it says when all kinds of bad things happen, people will ask, all the goyim will ask, why did these things happen? And they'll say, Al asher azvu es bris Hashem elokei abosam. You know why they had bad fortune? Because they left Hashem. She is parsim hadavar l'chol ha'umot shu me'es Hashem ba'onsham, and it will be known to all of the nations that it's because of Hashem in punishment. And they'll say b'kiyum, but if they do the right things, v'ro kol ha'mei haaretz ki Hashem Hashem al nikra alecha, then on contrary, they'll all see that Hashem is with you, v'yoru mimeka, and they will have fear of you. And I will explain more about this, Be'ezus Hashem, in other places. So that is the famous Ramban at the end of Parshas Bo. I think it's worth reading it through, at least once in seriousness. I didn't have a chance to. I had prepared some other things here, including the Ramban, including some things the Kuzari has to say, Rabbeinu Yoina. I think I'll just end with one thing. I saw a nice shiur on this related topic by Rav Osher Weiss. He said that there was a story that happened where there was a sculptor who was a very, very talented sculptor. Actually, I'm starting it wrong. That's the mashal in the answer. So the question was that there was a boy who at the Pesach Seder, his father was talking to him about all the nisim, and especially about Kriyas Yamsuf, and the boy asked his father, well, Hashem created the Yamsuf, so big deal. He split it, Why is that a big deal? If he knows how to make it, he knows how to split it. Why is that such a nice? He just did it that way. And he gave an answer, a mashal, about this great sculptor who made this unbelievable horse. It looked so lifelike. It was just amazing. Nothing else. So he wanted people to appreciate it. So they put it out in the public square, and they noticed nobody was looking at it. Right? And he was very despondent. He was very, I did this beautiful thing. Nobody paying any attention to him. And finally, he tells his family how brokenhearted he is. He says, "Look, you did it so well that everybody just thinks it's a horse like any other horse. Right? So why should anybody pay attention to it? Right? What did you do? You should go and split the horse in half and have it like that. Then people will pay attention to it." So that's what Hashem did with the Yamsuf. Basically, it was just going, etc. That Hashem from the unusual, you can see the usual. And he says, but in fact, if we were Zeicha, that we wouldn't need such things. And we would be able, I'll just finish with this, he recites a few psukim, a famous pasuk that Yeshaya says, Se'u marom enechem, ru'umi bara eila hamotzim es b'svatzvam. Lift up your eyes and see the creation. You should be able to see that from every fiber of it, as Hashem is calling out. Or David says, Ki era shemecha maseh basecha yerech v'kochavim asher kananta. I see the skies, I see the sun and suns, everything we see, etc. Hashem sings. So maybe we be zeicha to be able to see these things from Hashem and appreciate Hashem. I go like the Rambam or the Ramban, but either way, zeicha to Hashem.